Hello everyone and welcome back to the 2015 PMI Global Congress at Disney World in Orlando in Florida. Welcome back to the Project Management Podcast. With me right now is Jack Ferraro, and we want to discuss his paper and presentation, Measure Twice, Change Once, Practical Strategies for Change Management. Hello. Hi,
Hello,
Jack.
Cornelius. Good to see you
Welcome
again.
back. It looks like we're meeting each other every year at this conference or a similar one.
And it's a great, wonderful thing to see you again.
Okay. So let me ask you my first question here. That's the same one that I'm asking everybody at the Congress. 2016 is around the corner. What do you see as trends coming our way?
Yes, I saw your email. You gave me a little heads up on this question, which I certainly appreciate.
I don't want to just jump it on you.
Yeah. I think I really see two main trends. At the organizational level or at the organizational project management level, I see a trend towards increasingly adapting hybrid type of methodologies where people might be using agile in one part of the organization or more traditional waterfall or PMBOK processes in another part of the organization, and in some cases trying to meld these together and blend them together. So I think from a organizational standpoint, I see this hybrid approach becoming a trend. From a practitioner standpoint, I think the trend really still is around this identity crisis, the identity crisis of the project manager. Now that project management is really for everyone. And I've seen a lot of organizations having business leaders, functional managers, technical managers run projects, take the role of the project manager. So from an individual standpoint, I still think there's a level of anxiety around this identity crisis in terms of where the professional project manager fits into some of these hybrid life cycles.
All right. Practical Strategies for Change Management is the title of your paper and presentation, which you did this morning to a full ballroom, I hear. Why did you select this topic? What interests you in strategies for change management?
Well, I think one area where project managers can really distinguish themselves is around change management in terms of how they deliver project management services to their organization. My view of this is projects are the main vehicle or tool that organizations use to drive change in their organizations, to adapt, to achieve strategies, implement strategies, and so on. So by nature, the definition of a project is about implementing change, and I think change management, getting the attitudes, the capabilities, the urgency around these strategic projects and programs is a very critical competency and needs to be taken seriously, particularly when there's large amounts of money at stake, programs that might be, in the millions of dollars or tens of millions of dollars. There's a tremendous risk of not achieving the benefits that have been, let's say, guaranteed or sold to senior management if there are not the proper change management activities applied and integrated into the program or project.
Okay. Change has various facets. What type of change are we talking about here? Are we talking about changing corporate strategy or changes that are introduced by running a project and then putting it into operations? Or are we talking about a change request on my project? Or are we talking about all of these?
That's an excellent question. In the practice guide for change management that was published by PMI, it really defines first order, second order, and third order changes. My topic or my presentation is really geared towards the second and third order changes. The second order changes is where you're really changing how people do their work, changing their processes, and changing their attitudes in some extent in terms of what their role may be or what's important to them, what's important to the company. These changes are difficult to implement, and they're not easy to reverse. So if they're not implemented properly, they're very difficult to reverse. first order changes are more procedural based, things that can be implemented quickly, easily understood, and easily reversed as well. When we get to third order changes, this really deals with, what you talked about, organizational strategy, where really the purpose or the mission behind the organization might be changing or evolving. So people have to wrap their heads around this new strategy, this new identity as an organization. That requires significant change management activities as well. My presentation, my topic really doesn't address sort of the change order component, so the tactical change order to maintain scope control, things like that. It's really more about the organization's ability and willingness to implement these changes to achieve the benefits that are needed for the organization.
All right. Your presentation has three main parts, and we want to take a look at all three a little bit. First of all, we talk about portfolio management and change management. How are those two connected?
Well, you think of it this way. Project teams create product, service, and results that impact or change how organizations operate. While they're doing that, executives are often evolving organizational strategies to create new projects, new programs that change how project teams operate. So essentially, the connection here with change management is that we have to embed change management activities into our portfolio management, because we are, as we change portfolios, as we update strategies and have these portfolio components changed or reprioritized, that is going to impact the execution of our project teams, which are obviously then trying to impact change at the business or operational level. So I think change management, the connection is change management isn't just for project teams delivering to customers, but it's also about executives and portfolio managers delivering change to PMOs, to program teams, project teams.
Mm-hmm. You also talk about addressing a lack of strategic agility. So not being able to move quickly within your organization. How can we address that?
Yes, this is a fundamental change I think that's needed in a lot of organizations. The biggest challenge is getting executives, sponsors who really control resources in the organizations to execute projects and programs to realize that projects are not created as single project systems. In other words, the workers are not dedicated to the project typically. It's rare, it happens sometimes, often working on multiple projects with competing priorities. And we're not able to insulate these project workers from changes in strategy. So what happens is our portfolio components change, the priorities change, and this has dramatic impacts for shared resource systems that support multiple projects. I think the dynamic is that we have to achieve this strategic agility. We have to look at project teams as a complex system. Project work gets executed as a complex systems of projects and shared resources. In other words, there's a continuous flow of tasks that flow through this complex system that produce the outcomes that we need. Changes to strategy, changes to portfolio components obviously are going to impact the operations of this complex system. I think one of the biggest things that we can do from a portfolio standpoint to help achieve this strategic agility is to be able to begin our change management activities at the portfolio level. There's some key activities that portfolio managers can do to be able to start this process. Things such as developing a need statement. Why does this portfolio change? What is the strategy change? Being able to develop a vision for this project or program, have it be aligned with the organizational strategy. Being able to assess the organization's capability, willingness, and urgency to achieve this change in strategy. These are all things, are change activities and deliverables that can be created at the portfolio level and then transferred to the project teams. So those three items are critical, but the fourth one is probably the most important. The need statement, the vision, the assessments are all very important, but being able to have a clear prioritization of the portfolio components so resource conflicts can be deconflicted at the execution level will help essentially a fixed capacity of resources remain agile and be able to create the products, service, and results to be consumed by customers and achieve their benefits.
Okay, so much for the portfolio management and change management section. Let's move on to the next section, which is about organizational change on programs and projects. In particular, how we structure it. How do we do it?
I rely on 4 components to structure organizational change management within strategic projects and programs. I think of this as building a solid foundation. Just as you would build a house on a solid foundation, your strategic program has to be built on a solid foundation. There's 4 components which we can get into in detail. The first one is rallying around the need to change. The second one is responding to that need with a vision and creating a healthy tension between the real need, the why we need to change, and where we're going. And then thirdly is raising the program or project organizational structure, getting the right people from the customer team, the project team, and others involved in a structure that people understand their clear roles and responsibilities. And lastly, crystallizing a project mission statement which creates buy-in and accountability for both the project team and customer team.
All right. Can you give us maybe a high-level overview, a few more words about each of these? Let's start with the need statement.
Sure. The need statement really needs to be eye-catching. It needs to be open. It needs to be honest. It needs to be transparent. It's great if it can be delivered by a senior-level person in the organization that captures their attention. It shouldn't specifically be addressed at one department or one group of people. It needs to be inclusive so that there's not a tendency in the organization to point to say, well, that's that department's, that's marketing's problem. We're not involved in that. So articulating these need statements is very important. I can actually provide an example of one here. So imagine a senior level person in your organization standing in front of key stakeholders, maybe it's even the end users, 200-300 people in your organization, and saying something like, our company needs to significantly reduce operating costs in order to stay competitive with our competition and provide our employees with long-term career growth opportunities. These needs are critical to securing the future and health of our organization. This will require unprecedented commitment and collaboration and innovation from our partners, employees, and partners. This is an example of a need statement.
That's very high level. Right. Yeah, that's organizational wide.
Exactly. It's stating the case of why we need to change.
Yes.
And that need becomes a compelling driver to maybe a program or maybe multiple programs or even a portfolio. But it should be inclusive and it should acknowledge the challenges that exist. It should be transparent. The challenge here is that it's very difficult sometimes for organizations to be honest with themselves, right? Sometimes it feels like it becomes an indictment of maybe the previous management team or the current management team. So crafting this needs to be done very carefully with key stakeholders. It could take a few weeks or a month to make sure you go through the various iterations to where people feel comfortable with this. And even when you stand up and read this, or when a senior person stands up and read it, they're still going to have a tendency to say, oh, well, it's really not that bad, right? To ease people's fears. You've got to create enough anxiety where people pay attention to this change and understand and accept the fact that it is going to happen.
Is this something where you and your company help your customers to develop these need statements so that they can bring the urgency into their organizations?
Absolutely. And it starts with dialogue. It starts with asking questions, right? Why do we need to adapt agile? Why do we need to reduce costs? Why does throughput need to increase? And then through this dialogue and these questionings, we have to settle on some truths. The truths may be in the data, right? So there may be some analysis that needs to be done to come to these truths. But ultimately, after dialogue, after questioning, after seeking facts and truth, there needs to be a level of acceptance in the organization. This is typically an ongoing process in strategic projects and programs, this ongoing acceptance, continually validating the real need, going through this discovery process. And it really needs to be built into the core work of our projects and programs.
All right. So much for the needs statement, which is something that I've personally never come across. The one thing as a project manager I have come across, though, is the vision. Now, are we talking project vision here, or are we still on a more strategic, higher level?
Well, first of all, the fact that you say you've never seen a need statement before doesn't really surprise me, because a lot of people skip over that need statement because it is a very difficult process to face the truth, to face the real current state. The vision is the response to the need. Creating a vision statement is great, right? But if it doesn't meet a response, if people will ask, well, why are we doing this? An executive may come out and state a vision, this is where we need to go. People are likely to think, well, this is just to benefit him because he's got this on his management objectives, and this is going to increase the values of his shares that he holds, and so on. The vision needs to be a compelling response to the needs or the need statement that everyone accepts. This creates a healthy tension. This level of tension maintains a level of urgency at the ground level, at the grassroots level in the organization to drive the change forward.
So need statement, here's the problem, here's where we are, vision, this is where we need to go, this is where we need to end up, right?
Correct. So a good example of a vision statement might be, to remain a leader in our industry, all of us must contribute to the operational excellence program. It addresses the need, right, to remain a leader in our industry. It addresses some level of coordination. We must contribute to this branded program. Maybe it's called the Operational Excellence Program, or there's another name or branding for it. People know who are running the program. It will include maybe a statement that is specific to direction or outcome, reducing operational costs by 15% by 2016 using technology and process improvements across our supply chain, internal operations, and manufacturing. So now it's getting more specific, where there's specific measurements included in this vision, but there's also direction in terms of using technology, using process, and identifying key areas, supply chain, internal operations, manufacturing, and so on. So the vision sets the goal, identifies where we're going, and should also provide some motivation. So an example might be our reward would be to increase employment opportunities, competitive wages, and increase shareholder value. Now, it's easy to jump straight to the vision, but you don't have that collective tension at the grassroots level if you haven't thoroughly pursued and documented and articulated the need that vision is responding to.
Yeah, in most cases, when I was part of a vision development, we never talked about the need and why we were doing this. It was simply, let's create a vision for ourselves. Where are we heading here? Yeah. Next level up is structure.
Yes. Once we have the need and the structure, and we have this healthy tension, we need to make sure we have the right people involved. And I think of the structure, the project organizational structure or the program organizational structure, having three main components. A customer team. These are the teams that consume our deliverables and use them to achieve the benefits, use them to reduce operating costs by 40%. The project team produces the deliverables, right? They do the planning, they do the execution, they help clarify requirements. The customer team interacts with them over these deliverables to provide feedback to ensuring that we are on track to be positioned to achieve these benefits. The third component is this advisory team that provides insight and guidance. There might be very specific regulations, legal considerations, human resource management policies and things that we have to comply with that may not exist and be in the forefront of the minds of the customer and project team. So these people can help advise us to make sure, frankly, that we don't get in trouble or that we don't create unintended consequences. So the structure is not just about defining the project team. It also includes clearly defining the customer team and getting the right people on that team to be engaged in dialogue and interact over these deliverables, but also the advisory team to make sure that we have a less likely occurrence of having unintended consequences to these significant second and third order changes.
All right. And then finally, we're going down into the project mission, the fourth component.
Yes, the project mission is a very specific statement about the project. This is at the lowest level component in our portfolio. What are we exactly going to do? If we've done our need statement well, if we've done our vision well, we should be able to be very specific about a project mission statement. The format that I like to use reads like this. This project, and the project could be branded a certain name, right? The LPA project or the XYZ project will create, what are we creating? What specific outcomes, results, or deliverables are we creating to be used by whom? Who's our primary customer? Who is the primary audience who has to consume these deliverables? And what specific benefits are they going to achieve? So it might read something like this. The loan processing automation project will automate the receipt notification and processing of borrower documentation for production team members to reduce loan processing costs by 40%. In this case, we have a clear name for the project. We have a clear outcome in terms of the automation of very specific things. That's our result. We have a clear customer. In this case, the production teams were very specific people in this organization and certain roles that they have around these teams. And we have a very specific measurable benefit, reducing the cost of processing a loan by 40%. This now creates some accountability both on the project team side to deliver, right, to automate, and it also puts accountability on the customer, right, the production team, to make sure that they're getting what they need because they have to be held accountable to achieve that 40% reduction in cost or whatever the specific measurable outcome is. So this mission statement now finally unites everyone to a very specific deliverables or outcomes, clearly identifies who is responsible for receiving those and consuming those to achieve the specific benefits. That's what I call our project mission statement.
All right. And before we move on to the third component of your presentation, let's just remind everybody that we just looked at the four components of how we structure organizational change on programs and projects, and we looked at the need statement, the vision, the structure, and the project mission. So let's move on now to the to the third one, and that's measuring.
Yes, measuring change management is critical. It's important as project managers that we build our change management deliverables and measures into our work breakdown structure. And we build it in a way that it creates a level of visibility for this activity, that it's not buried for way down in the work breakdown structure under certain training activities or newsletters or T-shirts or things like that. So I like to see the work breakdown structure, level one, have a change management component. When we begin to think about measuring, we should think about three key measures. It ultimately comes down to the organization's ability to implement this change and their willingness, right? Their ability to implement a change, second or third order change, is a function of the level of urgency, right? Because everyone's busy, everyone's distracted, everyone's got more work to do than they have time. And it's also a function of their capabilities, right? So the organization's ability to change is a function of urgency and their capabilities. It's also a function of their willingness. This is a function of the organization's collective attitudes. So these are the driving factors that we should be trying to measure going into major projects and programs, and then continually measuring them throughout the implementation. An example of this might be surveying people in the organizations in terms of what are the positive factors or negative factors that are influencing our ability to change. Just for instance, if an employees have a good solid understanding of why we need to change, that would be a positive factor. And you can simply construct, well-written statements and present them with a scale to, a Likert scale or something to measure their either agreement or disagreement with that statement. Visible sponsorship could be a key positive or negative factor or lack of sponsorship. We can try to measure people's attitudes towards that. Things such as will team members or employees be rewarded for adopting this change, right? If people believe that they're going to be rewarded, that is potentially signaling an attitude that they're more likely willing to change. If they don't feel like they're going to be rewarded, that could be a negative factor or a resistance factor. You can ask similar type questions as just about capabilities. Capabilities to do certain things in the process, to be able to achieve certain goals in their process, whether it's turning a process around within 24 hours when the current metric is 36 hours, right? What is their capability from a system standpoint, from a training standpoint, from a resource standpoint? Once we start to assess these capabilities, these attitudes, and we sort of get a sense as to how strong the positive factors are and how strong the negative factors are, this is going to influence what we do in change management. This is going to influence exactly what type of change management activities we need to do to either increase these positive factors or reduce or eliminate the negative factors. I'll give an example. In one particular project, we surveyed the close to 3,000 people who were impacted by this change of different roles on these production teams. And we specifically asked the question is, how open do you believe these people in these roles are to conducting business in a new way? And we collected, several hundred data points on a scale, and we found out that most people at the grassroots level of this organization felt that these people were not open to new ways of doing business. So that told us right up front, it gave me the ammunition to go back to my sponsor and saying, we need to do very specific things here to change this attitude. And some of it involved doing workshops and getting key people involved in not only defining the problem, but also defining the solution and making their solutions, their ideas, very visible in the work that we were doing, so we can point back to specific people and say, hey, this was a solution presented by such and such a team in the Northeast or such and such a team in the West Coast, and they can feel more ownership of the work. We also created contests. If people met certain metrics, they would get certain rewards. In one example, we had a contest that if they met certain metrics, operational metrics, they would be entered into a contest. In other words, their name would be put into a hat, and there would be a drawing at the end of 6 months, and they would be eligible to drive a new BMW that would be leased by the organization for 2 years. So this is, this is, you have to be creative and capture your attention. If you don't measure these items going in, your efforts are likely to be marginal at best if you really don't understand the underlying currents to the change initiative.
Most of our listeners, they are project managers. So they're down implementing the projects, getting change requests, working with the customers. How would you say this is going to affect them on their day-to-day job?
Well, it's going to add more work to the project. Some people aren't going to want to hear that. But what it's also going to do, it's going to increase their probability of success. For instance, just the idea of communication, right? There's been many topics and discussions about project communications. Well, if we can measure how well our customer is receiving, reading, and comprehending key changes that we're making, we have a better chance of understanding whether they're going to meet their operational targets. So we have one of the things I've implemented with several customers is what I call a communication best practice, where we develop, short 10, 15-minute targeted pieces of content that are different, unique. It may use humor, maybe even a little bit provocative to capture people's attention. We measure not only how many people have read it, but how well they understand it. And then we begin to measure, coinciding with those measurements, we then begin to measure the changes in the operational behavior, the key scorecard metrics that drive the business, and seeing how those are impacted. And you always see a clear relationship. The people who aren't paying attention to the messages, who aren't reading it, who aren't comprehending it, those are the people that are less likely to see their measurements move. So ingraining these types of measurements are critical for project managers. I mean, these are the people that have to do this. It's not going to happen. The sponsor's not going to do it. The functional managers aren't going to do it. It's the project manager has to do it. So you have to build this into your plan and execute against these communication best practice methods.
All right. Other than it's us project managers who have to implement this, what was the number one takeaway that you wanted to give to the attendees of the presentation this morning, the thing that they take out of the room with them?
I think the number one thing is don't skip over the need statement.
Okay.
If there's anything that I really would have have them sort of leave with is you've got to be able to create this healthy tension. And if you jump immediately to the vision, here's what we need to do, people cannot make sense of why we're doing this. So really exploring that need, and even if it's painful, I mean, it should require a level of delicate and uncomfortable discussions with key stakeholders to really come to address this is the real need, this is the real current state, and ultimately what it does, it leads to much more unification around the vision. The vision really simply comes out of it much more naturally and allows better alignment and authorization of these projects and programs.
All right, Jack, thank you so much for being on the program again.
You're welcome, Cornelius. Great to see you.